Welcome, fellow language explorers, to the deep dive. We truly understand that immersing yourself in a new language, especially English, can sometimes feel a bit like wandering through a really intricate, maybe sprawling garden.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, you've got all these new plants, those unfamiliar words, and these winding, unfamiliar paths of grammar and idioms.
Right. It can feel a bit overwhelming at first.
It absolutely can. And it's incredibly rewarding when things finally click, but really grasping not just the individual words, but the natural flow, the genuine back and forth of real life conversation. Well, that can feel like a pretty big hurdle.
It really is. Moving beyond the textbook, into the living language where words and phrases just sort of grow organically through interaction. That's the real goal, isn't it?
Exactly. It's about cultivating confidence, really, much like you cultivate a garden.
Precisely.
And today we're taking a deep dive into a surprisingly rich world that we think offers an incredible shortcut to understanding and practicing that real English in its most natural form. Gardening.
Ah, gardening. Not what people might immediately think of for language learning, maybe.
Probably not. But this isn't just about soil or seeds or what to plant. It's about how an everyday hands-on activity like growing plants is just absolutely packed with practical vocabulary, common phrases, and that genuine chit-chat of people talking together.
Yeah, the kind of language you actually hear. By observing and discussing something so tangible, so universal like gardening, you start to pick up how native speakers really use language in context.
The nuances, the slang even, the rhythms of natural conversation, it's that kind of real-world immersion. It's just invaluable. It gives you a clearer understanding of how to express intent or describe a process, share experiences.
And all while building confidence in your own ability to connect with others, to actually use the language.
Exactly. So what exactly are we going to learn today in this verdant deep dive?
Well, we're going to cover pretty much the whole cycle,
Ah.
starting with those initial decisions, what to plant, and importantly, why. Then we'll get into the, let's say, inevitable challenges. Pests, unpredictable weather.
The fun stuff.
Right. And then the payoff, the sheer joy of harvest. And even looking at the bigger picture, things like sustainability.
Sounds fascinating. So get ready for some surprising facts, maybe some relatable anecdotes. You might find yourself laughing along with some of these and plenty of those aha moments.
Hopefully, moments that will definitely help you cultivate your English skills, making you feel more comfortable and more confident in your own conversations.
Consider this your linguistic gardening guide. Let's dig in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack this and start right at the beginning, the very start of our gardening journey, which mirrors the start of any new endeavor or even just a conversation, really. Many of us dream of growing our own food, right? Or maybe cultivating beautiful flowers. There's something just inherently appealing about it.
That connection to nature, yeah. The idea of fresh produce right outside your door.
Exactly. But when that dream starts to take root, the very next question is usually, okay, where do I even begin? What truly motivates someone to get their hands dirty, to commit the time and effort a garden demands?
Well, what's fascinating here, I think, is that the motivation often starts with a really practical thought, a question almost everyone can relate to, actually. What am I actually going to beat?
Right. Not just what looks pretty, but what serves a purpose.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your efforts.
Right.
Making sure that what you invest your time and energy into will actually, serve a purpose you value.
That makes sense.
Yeah. For example, our neighbor Michelle, she's a really seasoned gardener, years of hands-on experience. She shared this crucial insight. She only plants what she knows she'll consume.
Just what she'll eat. Simple as that.
Simple as that. It's a straightforward rule, but it helps her avoid waste, ensures every plant has a purpose. She mentioned she learned this the hard way after planting like a whole row of radishes one year.
Oh, dear. Did she not like radishes?
Apparently not particularly. And they just grew crazy, as she put it, but ultimately they just went uneaten. So that kind of intentionality, it streamlines the whole process, makes it less overwhelming maybe.
That makes so much sense. And it's not just about the food either, is it? This idea of intentionality. It must extend to other things we grow.
Oh, absolutely. Think about flowers, for instance. Michelle also pointed out the significant economic benefit there. Growing your own flowers is dramatically cheaper than buying them.
Oh, I bet. Cut flowers can be really expensive.
Yeah, it really can. She mentioned that one single flower, a beautiful rose or maybe a fancy dahlia, could easily cost $8 at a florist or even the grocery store.
Wow.
Whereas if you can grow a whole patch of something like zinnias, let's say, For the cost of a single packet of seeds, maybe just a couple of dollars, the savings are just incredible.
That's a huge difference, so that practical economic incentive must play a big role for a lot of people.
I think it does, yeah. Especially for folks looking to stretch their household budget, or maybe just wanting an abundance of fresh blooms without that hefty price tag.
And beyond the practical, the economic, there's definitely an emotional side too, isn't there? That feeling you get when you see something you've nurtured from just a tiny seed starting to push through the soil.
Oh, absolutely. There's immense personal pride, a really deep sense of accomplishment that comes from growing something from seed.
Yeah, even if it's just one little plant.
Exactly. It's often a quiet satisfaction, that inner glow of knowing you created something beautiful or delicious with your own hands, even if you don't go around telling every single person who walks through your door.
Although, let's be honest, many enthusiastic gardeners do.
Oh, they definitely do. But even if you don't, that feeling is a powerful motivator. It's that connection to the natural world, the simple joy of witnessing life unfold through your own care and effort.
So maybe the first big takeaway here for our English learners is this. When you're talking about any new hobby or passion or project, really listen for those personal motivators.
The why behind it.
Exactly. These are the emotional and practical roots, you could say, that anchor deeper conversations. They offer such a rich vein of vocabulary for expressing purpose, value, personal connection.
Words like intentionality or immense pride, sheer satisfaction, economic benefit, avoiding waste.
Right. Understanding why someone does something, it just unlocks a whole new layer of conversational depth, doesn't it?
It really does. It moves beyond just the surface level.
Okay, so you've got your motivation, you know why you want to garden. But here's where it gets really interesting, especially for beginners who might just think, oh, I'll just chuck some seeds in the ground and, see what happens.
Right, the sort of scattergun approach.
Yeah. But what's the secret, if there is one, to giving your plants the best possible start? And why isn't direct sowing just putting seeds straight into the garden soil? Why isn't that always the best or even the most effective way to go? Seems like there's more to it.
Well, this raises a really important question about control, actually, and about giving your plants every possible advantage you can. Starting seeds indoors, it just offers a much more controlled environment.
Okay, controlled how?
Well, you control the light, the temperature, the moisture, all those really crucial factors for sprouting and that delicate early growth.
Ah, so you're protecting them from the unpredictable outside world, basically.
Exactly. For instance, think about plants like peppers. They need a really long growing season to mature and actually produce fruit.
Right, they like it hot.
They love it hot. And if you live somewhere with shorter summers, you simply can't plant pepper seeds directly into the cold ground in spring and expect to get a decent harvest, or maybe any harvest at all.
So they need a head start.
They need a significant head start. They often need to be started very early, maybe February, when it's still quite chilly outside. They really thrive in a warm, consistent environment. People often use special grow lights and even heating pads underneath the seed trays just to coax them into sprouting.
Wow, okay. Heating pads for plants. It sounds like intensive care for seedlings.
It kind of is, but it provides that much longer growing season, which is just critical for those heat-loving plants like peppers, tomatoes, eggplant.
Right.
If you were to plant those seeds directly in the ground, even when it finally warms up in late spring, they might just not grow large enough or produce any fruit before the cold weather returns in the fall, cutting their season short.
That would be so disappointing after all the effort.
Exactly. Starting them indoors ensures they develop into pretty robust plants, often quite sizable by the time you transplant them outside. They're ready to bear fruit much earlier in the summer.
So you actually get to enjoy the harvest in, say, July or August, instead of waiting until September, maybe missing out completely.
Precisely. It makes a huge difference to your yield.
I can imagine another huge benefit, too, especially for beginners. Something that would prevent a lot of frustration, I think, of just identifying what you've actually planted.
Oh, that's a huge one. Yes. It saves so much headache.
Because when you just sprinkle seeds directly into the garden, especially if you're new to telling seedlings apart,
You're constantly wondering, is this a weed? Should I pull it?
and then you realize you've yanked out your precious flower or vegetable.
Happens all the time. Starting them indoors helps you clearly distinguish your desired plants from the weeds. You know exactly what you've got, you can plan your garden layout much more effectively, and you avoid that heartbreaking accidental weeding.
Definitely a key tip. And it sounds like people are getting really creative with how they do this indoor starting now, too. I heard about something called a seed snail. What on earth is that? It sounds intriguing.
Ah, yes, the seed snail. That's a really clever, kind of innovative solution, especially for people with limited indoor space or maybe not enough grow lights, often inspired by ideas you see shared online, like on Instagram or Pinterest.
Okay, so how does it work? Is it actually snail-shaped?
Sort of. Instead of needing those bulky traditional seed trays that take up a lot of bench space, you use a strip of something pliable, like plastic sheeting or even a repurposed plastic bag. You lay down a thin layer of moist soil, place your seeds along it,
Okay.
and then you carefully roll it up, like a spiral. So it ends up looking a bit like a snail shell stood on its end.
Ah, I see. So it's compact.
Incredibly compact. You could grow, say, 6 pepper plants in one rolled-up snail that takes up only a tiny fraction of the space a flat tray would need.
That's brilliant, especially if you only have one grow light setup.
Exactly. It's incredibly efficient. It just shows how gardeners are always finding creative ways to solve problems, adapting to their constraints.
That really offers practical, actionable advice then. Strategic early planning can lead to a much more bountiful harvest and help avoid those common beginner frustrations.
Absolutely. And it showcases that creative problem-solving spirit that's so common among gardeners.
Okay, for our English learners listening, this part of the conversation is just packed with vocabulary for describing processes, cause and effect, and solutions. Did you notice words like controlled environment, significantly increases, crucial factors, coax them into sprouting, distinguish, and innovative solution?
And pay attention to how verbs like start, plant, grow, control, increase, avoid are used to describe actions and their results. These are really the building blocks for explaining any process, whether it's gardening or, describing a project at work or explaining how something functions.
That's brilliant advice for getting those delicate seedlings off to a strong start. But once they've had that controlled beginning, or maybe you're ready to put seeds directly into the earth, then comes the delightful but sometimes daunting task of choosing the actual plants for your garden. Mm-hmm. The fun part.
The fun part, and just like people, maybe some plants are incredibly easygoing. They practically grow themselves with minimal fuss,
Yeah.
while others, well, they require a bit more nurturing, don't they?
Oh, definitely. It's like they have their own unique personalities, each needing slightly different things.
And each with a distinct set of English vocabulary to describe their needs and temperament.
That's true. And from a broader perspective, understanding the diverse nature of plants is absolutely key for any gardener. Different species have vastly different needs, different levels of inherent resilience, and that fundamentally impacts how we interact with them and how much care they demand.
So knowing what you're getting into with each plant is important.
Very important. For instance, certain plants are real champions of direct sowing. They thrive when their seeds are just put straight into the ground and require very little babying.
Babying, I like that term. It's very descriptive, giving extra gentle care, right?
Exactly. Very informal, but everyone knows what you mean. So, what are some of these low-maintenance heroes? The ones that might be good for a beginner or maybe someone just looking for some straightforward success?
Well, zinnias are a prime example.
Yeah.
Gardeners often call them cut-and-come-again flowers.
Cut and come again, meaning...
Meaning the more you pick the flowers, the more the plant produces, which is wonderful for having continuous blooms all summer long.
Oh, that's fantastic. The opposite of being afraid to pick them.
Exactly. And they also readily drop their seeds, so you often find them returning year after year, almost like a perennial, even though technically they're usually grown as annuals.
Okay, so annuals complete their life cycle in one season. Perennials come back year after year. Got it.
Right. But with zinnias, even though they're annuals, they self-seed so readily. Still, sprinkling some fresh seeds in May usually helps ensure a nice, vibrant, dense display. They're so easy that kids can have fun hiding among them or picking bouquets with permission, of course.
That sounds lovely. What else is easy like that?
Poppies, many types of wildflowers. They're naturally robust. They're often accustomed to what you might call bad soil or inconsistent temperatures, and they'll still manage to come up and put on a show.
Resilient characters?
Very resilient. Other good candidates for direct sowing often include things like beans, fair beans, specifically mentioned corn, and some types of pumpkins. These are plants that generally don't need that extensive indoor head start we were just talking about.
Okay, that sounds like a great starting point for someone who's new to gardening and maybe feels a bit intimidated. Just, put the seeds in the ground and let nature do most of the work.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But then, of course, there are those plants that really benefit from that longer season and the indoor start we discussed earlier. The ones that need a little more help to truly flourish.
Right, the ones that need that babying.
Exactly. These are the plants that typically have a more prolonged growth period, and they really shine when given that controlled beginning indoors. Peppers, as we mentioned, are a classic example. Tomatoes, too, especially determinate varieties.
Determinate. What does that mean?
Determinate tomatoes are types that grow to a certain fixed size. They're usually bushier, and then they ripen most of their fruit all at once over a shorter period. This makes them ideal if you're planning a big canning session, for example.
Okay. As opposed to indeterminate, which just keep growing and producing.
Exactly. Indeterminate vines can get huge and produce fruit over a much longer season. Eggplant also usually falls into the category of plants benefiting from an indoor start. Without it, you might not get a significant harvest before the season ends, especially in cooler climates.
Got it. And it's not always about achieving perfection, is it? I mean, sometimes you learn from your own little experiments or maybe even happy accidents. I remember Vanessa mentioned her approach with butternut squash and blue Hubbard pumpkins.
That's a great illustration of how gardeners adapt and learn through experience. Yeah, Vanessa mentioned planting 2 seeds per container, often underestimating the seed's viability, how likely they are to actually sprout and grow.
Which is something we all do, right?
Yeah.
Plan extra just in case.
Absolutely. It's a common, relatable experience. You hope for 2 strong seedlings, but sometimes only one emerges, or maybe none. It's part of the process.
And then there's the aesthetic side, too, like Dan's sunflower circle you mentioned.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, featuring beautiful heritage versions, red sunflowers, light yellow, lemon-colored ones that apparently only start blooming later in the season. These aren't just plants grown for food. They become expressions of personal style, landscape features, and ongoing learning experiences.
It shows there's so much creativity involved.
Definitely.
Okay, English learners, another vocabulary checkpoint here. This section really highlights how to talk about preferences, ease of use, and differences in characteristics. Did you catch phrases like easygoing, minimal fuss, babying, thrive when, prime example, and classic example?
The terms annuals and perennials are also great for describing duration and recurrence, and determinate versus indeterminate for tomatoes. This whole section provides a rich vocabulary for describing things that are low maintenance versus those that require more dedication.
And you can apply that to so many aspects of life, right? Not just gardening. Describing projects, tools, even people sometimes.
Absolutely. It's about describing characteristics and needs.
Okay, so you've chosen your plants, you've got them started. But then every gardener, sooner or later, faces the inevitable.
Ah, yes. The uninvited guests.
The creatures who think your hard work, your precious plants, your ripening harvest, it's all just their personal buffet. It's a constant battle, isn't it? A negotiation with the wild.
It really is. And it raises that important question. How do we coexist with the natural world while still protecting our efforts and ensuring we actually get to enjoy some of the bounty ourselves? It's a constant negotiation, and often a very creative one. You're definitely never truly alone in the garden.
So let's talk specifics. Who are some of the most notorious culprits, the usual suspects that seem to show up every single year in the garden?
Oh, the list is long. And their methods are varied and often infuriating. Squirrels, for instance, are notorious for getting to the corn first, often just days before you plan to harvest it.
That's the worst.
It really is. And raccoons. Even more infuriating, maybe. They're infamous for their particular habit of taking just one bite out of every single ear of corn on a stalk, ruining the whole lot before moving on to the next.
Oh no, just one bite. That's just spiteful.
It feels like it. Groundhogs or woodchucks can be a massive problem too. They're capable of just decimating an entire patch of greens or beans in a single afternoon.
Wow, they're efficient.
Terribly efficient. My neighbor shared this story of a past groundhog invasion that became quite the saga. It led to her trapping and releasing 7 of them far away, of course.
7. That's an invasion.
It really was. And apparently there was even one accidental death during the trapping process, which she insists was respectfully buried. It sounds almost like a comedy of errors, but it's also this profound reminder of our constant, sometimes absurd, negotiation with the wild.
Absolutely. And what about bigger animals?
Deer are a major challenge in many areas, too. They're known for eating sunflowers right down to the stalks, or jumping fences, even tall ones, to get to tasty things like hostas or tulips.
Okay, so mammals are a big issue, but then there are the tiny invaders, the insects. They might be small, but they can cause huge problems, right?
Oh, yes. Insects are a whole other category of challenge. You've got aphids, those tiny, usually green or black sap-sucking insects. They can just infest plants and trees, literally sucking the life out of them, leaving behind this sticky residue called honeydew.
Hmm. What do people do about them?
Well, sometimes gardeners try introducing ladybugs, which are natural predators of aphids. The hope is they'll stick around and eat them.
Do they?
Often they'd fly away, seemingly unimpressed with the buffet you've provided. Then you have flea beetles, tiny, shiny black beetles that jump like fleas. They chew tiny shotgun holes in the leaves of plants like eggplant or potatoes.
Shotgun holes, that sounds dramatic.
It looks quite bad, but often the plants can recover if they're strong enough and well established. And then there are Mexican bean beetles. They look a bit like ladybugs, but they're usually copper-colored. They cause this distinctive veining or skeletonizing damage on bean leaves.
Skeletonizing. Yikes. Does that kill the plant?
Interestingly, though the leaves can look pretty rough, the damage often doesn't significantly affect the bean pods themselves, which is a small mercy.
Okay, so given all these threats, squirrels, raccoons, groundhogs, deer, aphids, beetles, what are the strategies for managing them? Are people talking strictly organic methods, or is there a bit more pragmatism involved in, actually getting a harvest?
That's where it gets really interesting because gardeners often develop this blend of approaches. They might move beyond a rigid ideology towards more practical results.
Mhm.
Michelle, for example, she mentioned she isn't strictly hung up on organic.
Hung up on organic, meaning she's not obsessively committed only to organic methods.
Exactly. While she definitely prefers not to spray chemicals indiscriminately, and she tries to plan ahead, like using companion planting.
Companion planting, what's that?
It's the practice of planting certain plants near others to help them out. For instance, planting marigolds near tomatoes is believed to repel certain pests, maybe like aphids or nematodes. Or planting basil near tomatoes is said to improve their flavor.
Huh, interesting. So she tries things like that first.
Yeah, she tries preventative, natural methods
Mhm.
first, but she's also pragmatic. If using a targeted spray means she'll actually get an eggplant to eat after weeks and weeks of nurturing it, well, she's willing to use it sometimes.
So it's about finding that balance between ideals and results, and maybe sometimes making tough choices to protect your efforts. What are some of those natural or organic options people commonly try?
Well, many gardeners start with things like neem oil, which is a natural insecticide derived from the neem tree,
Hmm.
or diatomaceous earth that's a natural powdery substance made from fossilized algae. It works physically, basically shredding the exoskeletons of soft-bodied insects that crawl over it.
Okay, sounds kind of brutal but natural.
It is. Then there's BREAT, which stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a naturally occurring soil bacterium that produces proteins toxic to certain insect larvae, like caterpillars, but it's generally harmless to beneficial insects, birds, and mammals.
So it's more targeted?
Much more targeted. It can sometimes be injected directly into pumpkin or squash stems, for instance, to combat the dreaded squash vine borer.
Oh, I've heard about those. They tunnel inside the stem, right?
Well, exactly. They're moth larvae that tunnel in and basically eat the plant from the inside out, often killing it very quickly. Injecting by can sometimes help, although its effectiveness can vary. But the anecdote of someone literally vaccinating their precious pumpkin plants with a needle,
Vaccinating plants.
it vividly highlights the dedication and sometimes the slightly quirky methods gardeners employ.
Hmm.
And as we mentioned, ladybugs are often tried as biological control, but they do tend to just fly off and don't necessarily stay and help in your specific garden.
Right, they have places to be. And what about the stronger, more conventional pesticides? Are they ever considered or are they generally avoided?
Well, common broad-spectrum pesticides like Sevin dust are certainly effective at killing pests. But the problem is they kill all bugs, the good ones and the bad ones. They can wipe out beneficial pollinators like bees and predators like spiders or ladybugs that actually help keep pests in check.
Ah, so it can disrupt the whole ecosystem of the garden.
Exactly. Which is why many gardeners, even if they're not strictly organic, prefer to try more targeted natural solutions first. even if it involves something that feels a bit freakish or unconventional, like injecting beet into a plant stem with a needle.
It really gives you a realistic look at the challenges, doesn't it? And the diverse, sometimes experimental ways gardeners try to protect their crops. It makes you think critically about different pest control philosophies.
And find what works best for your situation, yeah. While also appreciating the humor and dedication involved in this constant negotiation with nature.
Okay, English learners, listen up. This segment is just gold for vocabulary describing problems and solutions, especially when things get tough. Did you catch words and phrases like coexist, notorious culprits, decimating an entire patch, saga for the groundhog story, pragmatic, targeted spray, and physical deterrent?
We also heard those great idiomatic expressions like babying, hung up on organic, and comedy of errors. Understanding how to describe a challenge clearly and then outlining the various strategies used to try and overcome it, that's a really crucial conversational skill in any context.
Definitely. Okay, so you're battling the pests, but then, just when you think you've got that figured out, the weather reminds you who's really in charge.
Oh, always.
From torrential rain to scorching heat, it feels like a constant dance with the elements, doesn't it? You really do become an amateur meteorologist when you start gardening, always checking the forecast.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how gardening makes us so acutely aware of environmental conditions that we might otherwise just, overlook or complain about briefly.
Right, you feel it more.
You feel it more because it fosters this deeper, more intuitive connection to nature's rhythms. The health of your plants is just so directly tied to the weather. We recently had lots of good rain, for instance.
Which sounds like a good thing.
It was. It led to exceptionally large daisies this year, almost bigger than we've ever seen them. They just seem to explode with blooms. But then, right now, as we're talking, there's a sudden, really powerful thunderstorm rolling in it. You might even hear the thunder booming.
Yeah, I hear that. Hope the power stays on.
Exactly. It makes us acutely aware that too much rain can also be a problem. It threatens our recording session with power outages, but in the garden, it can cause issues like root rot or fungal diseases.
It's all about balance, isn't it? And nature certainly doesn't always provide that. It often seems to swing from one extreme to another. What about the other end of the spectrum, that intense heat we've been experiencing lately?
Oh, the extreme heat is a huge factor, and it impacts absolutely everything. We've had experiences of temperatures in the 90s Fahrenheit during the day, which, with the humidity, can feel like 106 degrees, according to the heat index.
Wow, 106. That's brutal.
It is. And it makes daytime gardening incredibly difficult, if not downright dangerous or impossible. It's a stark reminder of the physical demands of working outside. It makes you appreciate why real farmers wear those wide-brimmed hats and long sleeves for protection, something we often forget until we're out there ourselves just wilting under the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel it in yourself, too.
You really do. And the visible effect of humidity, hair getting bigger and frizzing up, adds a very relatable human element to these environmental conditions. You don't just feel the heat. You see and feel its effects on yourself and everything around you.
And it seems like the plants themselves are sending us signals, too, even when we don't realize it. Like they're acting as these sensitive barometers of their environment.
They absolutely are. Even now, in mid-July, there are observations of weeping cherry leaves, which should be lush and vibrant green, starting to prematurely turn yellow and drop.
Already. In July, that seems really early for fall colors.
It's incredibly early.
Yeah.
And it's a clear signal that fall is arriving ahead of schedule, almost certainly influenced by the prolonged high temperatures and maybe drought stress. It's like the trees are telling us we're struggling with this heat. This season is under stress.
Wow, so gardening really transforms you from just a casual observer into a keen environmental monitor.
It really does. It highlights that direct link between weather patterns and plant health, encouraging you to develop a more intuitive understanding of your local climate and adjust your gardening practices accordingly. It's like a hands-on lesson in ecological awareness and the need for adaptability.
For our English learners, this part of our deep dive is fantastic for vocabulary describing environmental conditions and their impact. Notice words like torrential rain, scorching heat, constant dance with the elements, acutely aware, fosters a deeper connection, unpredictable, and prematurely.
Also, those descriptive phrases like swinging from one extreme to another or wilting under the sun, they paint really vivid pictures. Discussing the weather is such a common conversational topic everywhere, and this segment gives you specific and descriptive language to do it much more engagingly than just saying it's hot.
Very true. Okay, so we've navigated the planting, the pests, the weather. Now for the payoff, the
Talk to
moment of truth. After all that effort, the planting, the weeding, the pest battles, the dance with the weather, what actually makes it to your plate?
The harvest.
The harvest. And, just as importantly, what lessons do you learn when things don't go exactly as planned? Because let's be honest, perfect harvests are pretty rare, right? Every gardener has stories of triumph, but also usually a healthy dose of humbling failure.
Oh, absolutely. And it raises that important question. What really defines success in the garden? And how do we learn from what doesn't work? Every single season offers new insights, unexpected triumphs, alongside the inevitable challenges.
So, what were some of the big successes this season, according to the experiences shared?
Well, many classic garden staples seem to do really well. Tomatoes, for instance, were mentioned as a big win. Those determinate varieties we talked about, like vintage wine and San Marzano, ripened abundantly, almost overwhelmingly so.
Good problem to have.
Definitely. Some plants apparently got so heavy with fruit they actually started to fall over, needing extra staking or support. Kentucky Wonder green beans, a climbing variety, were also incredibly productive, providing daily harvests despite some presence of those Mexican bean beetles we discussed earlier. They showed remarkable resilience.
That's great to hear about the staples. But beyond the classics, what about some of the more unique or unusual things? Were there unexpected delights?
Oh yes, beyond the staples, some unique triumphs really stood out. Blue Hubbard pumpkins, for example.
Blue Hubbard. I'm not sure I know that one.
It's a fantastic winter squash.
Hmm.
It was celebrated apparently for making the best-tasting pumpkin pie, and they were growing wonderfully. They're beautiful squashes. They turn this distinctive blue-gray color as they mature, and importantly, they store exceptionally well, lasting deep into the winter months.
Wow, tasty and long-lasting. That's a win-win.
Definitely. Sweet potato pumpkins and African squash were also thriving, noted for being both tasty and remarkably pest-resistant, which is always a huge bonus.
Pest-resistant is music to a gardener's
Is
ears.
Nick's test. We also heard about Trompentino squash. That was a clever choice because it's known for being naturally vine borer resistant.
Hmm.
Those destructive pests generally leave it alone. And apparently it tastes wonderfully like zucchini.
Oh, interesting. A zucchini alternative that the borers ignore.
Exactly. And then there were gooseneck gourds being grown, not really for eating, but more for decorative purposes or even for crafting, making instruments or bowls once they're dried.
How creative.
Yeah. And ground cherries were mentioned, described as a very unusual type of fruit. They grow low to the ground in a papery husk, kind of like a small tomatillo. Apparently they grow everywhere, taste good, raw, sweet, and tangy, and are harvested frequently, like finding little sweet surprises under the leaves.
I need to try those. And what about greens and herbs?
On the greens and herbs front, collard greens and kale were described as solid and plentiful. Dill apparently formed a literal dill forest towering over other plants, and Dan's meticulous herb spiral was yielding a fantastic array. Rosemary, lavender, tarragon, chives, sage, thyme, oregano, all perfect for culinary experiments, like his cheesy chives scrambled eggs.
Mmm, sounds delicious. That's an impressive list of triumphs. It really shows the amazing variety that can come from even a home garden. But as you said, gardening isn't always smooth sailing. What about the inevitable failures or challenges encountered this season? What did they teach?
Right, the garden also yields its share of disappointments and, crucially, learning opportunities. It reminds us that nature always has the final say, really. Both peach trees mentioned were struggling, for instance. One apparently had no buds at all this year, which is a sad sight after waiting for fruit, and the other looks like it might die, which is always heartbreaking when you've invested time and hope in fruit trees.
Oh, that is tough. Fruit trees are a long-term commitment.
They really are. Potatoes were also mentioned as a particular challenge this season. The plants died off prematurely, yielding only small baby potatoes. And there was even speculation that some of these might have just been tiny potatoes from last year that somehow survived the winter and resprouted, not actual new growth.
So a disappointing potato harvest.
Seems so. And then there's the delightful, if sometimes frustrating, chaos of volunteers taking over.
Volunteers, you mean plants you didn't actually plant yourself?
Exactly. Plants that sprout from seeds dropped from previous seasons, completely unasked for. Unclatted gourds and sunflowers, while often lovely in their own right, can apparently aggressively choke out desired plants like cucumbers if they're not managed. Passion flowers were also mentioned as spreading aggressively beautiful, but they can be quite demanding and take over areas quickly.
So sometimes your own success from last year becomes this year's problem?
Precisely. It often leads to acknowledging, maybe with a chuckle, poor planning skills, pathways getting completely taken over, or plants becoming overgrown jungles. but it also kind of forces a gardener to embrace the chaos garden aesthetic.
The chaos garden. I like the sound of that. Less pressure.
Exactly. Where you find beauty and productivity in the unexpected, the slightly untamed. It's a lesson in letting go of rigid control and just seeing what happens. This section really paints that realistic picture, doesn't it? The garden's bounty alongside its unpredictability.
It really does. It highlights the joy of discovering new, unusual plants, but also the resilience you need when crops just don't perform as expected. And it shows how personal style, like embracing a chaos garden, can influence a gardener's whole approach.
Finding joy in the journey, not just the perfect outcome.
Okay, another moment for our English learners. This segment provides such a wealth of vocabulary for describing success, failure, abundance, and disappointment. Look for words and phrases like moment of truth, inevitable failures, humbling failure, unexpected triumphs, yields its share of disappointments, heartbreaking, decimated, like the groundhogs, and embracing the chaos.
That contrast between successes and challenges is a really common conversational structure. It allows you to share both the highs and the lows of any experience, whether it's personal or professional, in a balanced way.
Definitely a useful structure to practice. Okay, so when your garden is successful, when it's overflowing, that's truly a wonderful problem to have. But then comes the next challenge. How do you make all that bounty last beyond the immediate harvest? You can only eat so many fresh tomatoes or green beans in 1 week, right?
Absolutely. This is where the ingenuity and often the traditional skills of preservation come in.
Making the harvest last longer.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how gardening almost naturally leads us back to these ancient practices of food preservation. It connects us to this long human history of making food last beyond its natural season. It's a really vital step in maximizing the yield from your garden and extending the enjoyment of the harvest. And it's definitely a skill that's being revitalized today.
So what are some of the main methods people use? I guess canning is a big one.
Canning is definitely a popular and very satisfying method, yeah. Michelle apparently plans to learn how to can her determinate tomatoes, those ones that ripen all at once, creating that sudden abundance. Perfect for canning.
Is canning difficult? It sounds a bit intimidating to some people, maybe. All the sterilizing and boiling.
It can seem intimidating at first, but for many basic techniques, like water bath canning for acidic foods like tomatoes or pickles, it's actually relatively straightforward. Vanessa, who had already successfully canned peaches, suggested teamwork for future canning projects and apparently described it as relatively easy, saying something like, if you can boil water.
If you can boil water, meaning it's pretty simple, that's a great English idiom.
Exactly. It suggests something is very simple, very basic. Of course, you need to follow instructions carefully for safety, but the basic process isn't overly complex for many things.
Okay, that's reassuring. But what if canning still feels like too big a step, especially with a huge tomato harvest? Are there other options?
Oh, definitely. For large tomato harvests, if canning feels too daunting or time-consuming, other excellent options include simply making batches of sauce and freezing it.
Ah, freezing sauce. That seems easier.
It is generally simpler, yeah. It's a great way to capture that intense, fresh flavor of summer tomatoes for later enjoyment, whether it's for pasta sauces, soups, or stews throughout the winter.
Good tip. And what about other vegetables, like those abundant green beans you mentioned, or other produce?
Well, beans can be pickled, which offers another delicious way to preserve them and adds that wonderful tangy twist to your pantry. Pickling isn't just for cucumbers, you know. You can pickle green beans, carrots, beets, onions, almost any vegetable, really.
Dilly beans. I love those.
Exactly. And for certain crops, simple storage is surprisingly effective, requiring no special processing at all. Pumpkins and winter squashes, like that Blue Hubbard variety we mentioned, are fantastic for this. They can often be kept for a long time, sometimes months, just by storing them in a cool, dry, dark place, maybe a laundry room, a closet, or a cool basement corner.
Just letting them sit there.
Pretty much, yeah, as long as the conditions are right. This natural storage allows you to enjoy them well into the winter months. This whole segment really encourages you to think about the full life cycle of food, doesn't it? From growing it, to harvesting it, to storing it effectively.
It does. It provides practical methods for reducing waste and enjoying your garden produce year-round. And I like the idea of collaborative efforts, like canning with neighbors. Makes it more manageable and fun.
Yeah, sharing the work and the bounty.
Okay, English learners, pay attention here. This section introduces some excellent vocabulary related to food preparation and conservation. Did you notice words like overflowing, bounty, preservation, maximizing the yield, intimidating, daunting, capture the flavor, and tangy twist?
And that idiom, "if you can boil water," is a perfect example of how native speakers use simple, relatable phrases to convey meaning effectively. Discussing food, cooking, and how to make things last is such a practical and common conversation topic, and these terms will definitely help you engage more fully.
So we've gone through the whole cycle, from seed to storage. What does this all mean for the bigger picture? Can you really live off your land these days? What does it actually take to become more self-sufficient, even in a small way, in today's world? It seems like such a romantic ideal sometimes, but the reality must be quite complex, surely. Much more than just growing a few vegetables.
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the idea of survival and true self-sufficiency quickly expands way beyond just growing vegetables. It really encompasses a much broader ecosystem and often, as you hinted, a vital community aspect.
Community survival. How so?
Well, the idea emerged in conversation, this notion that combining efforts with neighbors, pooling resources like garden produce, maybe extra eggs from someone's chickens, could create a more sustainable, more resilient local community.
Sharing the load and the rewards.
Exactly. Imagine making hearty omelets for a neighborhood breakfast using fresh eggs from one house and juicy tomatoes harvested directly from another garden, all shared among friends. It really shifts the focus from purely individual effort towards collective strength and mutual support.
That's a really great point about community broadening the scope. But what about the actual nutritional needs for survival? Vegetables are wonderful for health and flavor, obviously, but they don't provide everything, do they? Especially in terms of raw energy, calories.
That's a crucial distinction. While vegetables are fantastic for vitamins, minerals, and variety, they often lack sufficient calories for true long-term survival, especially for doing physical labor. To really sustain oneself, there's an emphasized need for high-calorie staple crops, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, and various types of beans and legumes. These provide the essential energy needed to keep going.
So you need the carbs and protein too.
You really do. And beyond just crops, true self-sufficiency often involves integrating animals into your system, if that's feasible and desired.
Right. Animals definitely bring a whole new level of commitment and responsibility, though. Tell us a bit about that. What are the practicalities and challenges involved there?
Well, chickens are a popular starting point for many, providing a relatively consistent source of eggs, sometimes up to 10 per day, from just a small flock, which is incredibly valuable, especially with rising grocery prices, where eggs can be around $7 a dozen or even more in some places.
10 eggs a day is significant.
It really is. However, chickens were also described, affectionately perhaps, as trouble, implying a significant daily commitment for feeding, watering, coop cleaning, and sometimes dealing with unexpected mischief or health issues.
Okay, so not zero effort. What about larger animals?
Then you consider larger livestock, like cows or goats for milk. The commitment level there was described as relentless. Relentless. Milking, for instance, typically needs to be done twice a day, every single day, regardless of the weather, your personal health, holidays. It's a completely non-negotiable task. Owning milk animals essentially means giving up spontaneous vacations and committing to constant, dedicated care, even if you have modern aids like milking machines.
Wow, that's a huge lifestyle change.
It's massive. And with goats, you often need more than one news. Usually a doe needs to have had a baby recently to produce milk, so it becomes even more complex. It requires immense dedication.
I also heard a fascinating, if maybe somewhat controversial, discussion about another animal considered highly sustainable for meat.
Ah, yes. The idea of raising rabbits for a highly sustainable meat source was brought up. It was presented as a compelling option from a purely logistical standpoint, offering regular harvest every few months due to their famously rapid breeding cycle.
Logistically compelling, but
But the major hurdle, acknowledged openly, isn't the sustainability factor, which is subjectively quite high, but the profound emotional difficulty involved in actually dispatching them, especially when children, or even adults, form attachments to them as pets.
right. That's a huge emotional barrier for many people.
It's a very real internal conflict. The discussion seemed to remain neutral, focusing on the factual sustainability aspect juxtaposed with that inherent emotional conflict. It really highlights the complex ethical considerations that come intertwined with self-sufficiency goals.
Absolutely. And underlying all of this, access to land or even just adequate space plays a huge role, doesn't it? It can feel like real self-sufficiency might be out of reach for many people just because of space constraints.
It absolutely does. And it's really important to acknowledge that having land, especially enough for crops and maybe animals, is often a privilege that not everyone shares. However, it's also crucial to remember that gardening itself can be done on many scales, on a patio, a balcony, even a sunny window ledge with container plants.
So you can still participate, even in a small way.
Absolutely. And sometimes these smaller scale efforts can even lead to greater success per plant, perhaps, because of the focused care a limited area allows. In today's world, where food is generally readily available in stores for most people in developed countries, the motivation for intensive self-sufficiency might shift away from pure necessity. It might become more about pursuing a deep passion, or seeking sound economic benefits, or maybe a desire for preparedness and a sense of security.
That's a really insightful way to frame it. This whole segment is quite thought-provoking, isn't it? It encourages you to consider the really multifaceted nature of self-sufficiency.
Yeah, from the practical challenges like getting enough calories to the ethical dilemmas of animal husbandry.
It prompts reflection on the value of local food systems, the importance of community, and just the surprising complexities of trying to live sustainably in our modern world.
It's definitely not as simple as just planting a few seeds.
Okay, English learners, this part of the deep dive offered some more advanced vocabulary for discussing complex social and environmental issues. Did you catch words like self-sufficiency, encompasses, ecosystem, community survival, resilient, nutritional needs, relentless commitment, controversial, logistical challenges, ethical dilemmas, and privilege?
These terms are really vital for engaging in more nuanced discussions about sustainability, societal structures, personal choices, and ethics. They allow you to articulate viewpoints with more precision and depth.
Definitely worth reviewing those.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, gardening isn't just about what you grow or even the challenges, but also how you grow it aesthetically. Some gardeners meticulously plan every row, embracing order and neatness.
Straight lines, everything labeled.
Exactly. While others seem to find beauty and maybe even a strange kind of efficiency in a captivating chaos. What's fascinating about these different approaches to garden design, and how do they maybe reflect a gardener's personality or philosophy?
Well, what's really fascinating here, I think, is how personal expression gets so profoundly intertwined with ecological principles and practical considerations in garden design. It really does reflect individual philosophies, whether someone prioritizes neatness and control or prefers to embrace the wilder, more unpredictable tendencies of nature.
Can you give an example of a more structured approach?
Sure. Take Dan's meticulously designed herb spiral, for example, that was mentioned. It's typically a structured, elevated garden bed, often made of stone or brick, that spirals upwards.
Spirals upwards. How does that help?
This clever design creates different microclimates within a small footprint. The top of the spiral is drier and sunnier, perfect for herbs like rosemary and lavender that prefer those conditions. As the spiral slopes downwards, the soil retains more moisture, so plants like tarragon, chives, sage, thyme, and oregano can be arranged around the base where conditions are cooler and damper.
So it's organizing plants by their needs in a vertical space. Very clever.
It's both highly functional and visually appealing. It maximizes space and plant health in a really compact area. A great example of thoughtful, ordered design.
I know, so that's an example of order and deliberate, clever design. What about something that leans more towards the wilder, more untamed side, perhaps for larger spaces?
A native wildflower field provides a wonderful contrast. This might be created simply by stopping mowing an area of lawn, maybe removing some turf initially, and then sowing a mix of native wildflower seeds suitable for the local area.
So less about individual planting, more about creating a habitat.
Exactly. What's really interesting is that different varieties often emerge each year in this beautiful natural succession. Maybe you get a carpet of black-eyed Susans one year, and the next year, perhaps rattlesnake master, which is a really unique spiky native plant, becomes more prominent.
Rattlesnake Master, what a name.
Isn't it great? The whole area becomes much more field-like and less curated than a formal flower garden. It provides excellent habitat for pollinators, birds, beneficial insects, and apparently even local cats who enjoy sitting hidden within the tall blooms. It really embraces a natural evolution rather than strict human planning.
I love that idea. And I heard about a sunflower circle, too. That sounds like a really unique, almost whimsical feature. What's the idea behind that?
It does sound whimsical. It's a deliberate sunflower circle creation where tall sunflowers are planted intentionally in a circular pattern. The idea is to form a kind of living room or a secret hideaway within the garden.
Like a sunflower fort.
Exactly. Dan's circle apparently featured those beautiful heritage versions, the striking red, light yellow, and lemon hues, which only started blooming later in the season. It serves as a unique aesthetic feature, a dramatic backdrop, and indeed a fun hiding spot for children, even despite sometimes suffering from animal damage like deer nibbling the heads, which just adds to its rustic charm, perhaps. It's a deliberate design choice that really leans into natural beauty and a sense of fun.
It sounds magical. And then there's the chaos garden philosophy we touched on earlier, where you just kind of let nature do its thing almost and embrace the unexpected. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, the Chaos Garden really embraces the unpredictable nature of those volunteers. The plants that spontaneously sprout from seeds that fell to the ground the previous year.
The self-seeders taking charge.
Pretty much. Unplanted tomatoes, gourds, sunflowers often take over pathways, creating this lush, if slightly untamed, landscape. Examples mentioned included African squash, climbing up a trellis in unexpected places, thornless blackberries sprawling wherever they please, alongside collard greens, kale, and those ground cherries growing prolifically, almost aggressively, wherever they find a spot.
So it's about letting the plants lead, finding beauty in the abundance, even if it's not perfectly organized.
Exactly. And one fascinating practical observation emerged from this approach. Pumpkins planted directly on the ground were often healthier than those grown trained up on archways or trellises,
Really? Why is that?
because their sprawling vines, when they touch the soil, often send down little extra roots directly into the ground at various points along the vine. These anchor the plant better and allow it to draw more nutrients and moisture directly from the soil, in addition to the main root system.
Huh. So sometimes letting them sprawl is actually better for the plant.
It seems so, for pumpkins at least. This whole section really encourages you to experiment, doesn't it? With different garden aesthetics, different functional designs. It highlights how embracing nature's tendencies, even the chaotic ones, can lead to surprising beauty and unexpectedly healthy plants. It fosters creativity and maybe a more relaxed, adaptable approach to gardening.
Letting go of perfectionism, maybe.
Exactly that.
Okay, final vocabulary focus for our English learners. This segment explored vocabulary related to design, aesthetics, and that relationship between order and spontaneity. Words and phrases like meticulously planned, embracing order, captivating chaos, personal expression, intertwined, structured approach, microclimates, wilder tendencies, natural succession, whimsical feature, untamed landscape, and sprawling are excellent for describing visual layouts and philosophical approaches to any project or space, not just gardens.
Pay attention to how those words help create a really vivid picture of different styles and approaches, useful for describing art, design, even personalities.
Absolutely. Well, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, we really hope you've not only gained some fascinating insights into the world of gardening.
Which is interesting in itself.
It really is. But more importantly, we hope you've recognized the incredible opportunity that everyday conversations about everyday activities offer for learning English. We've explored so much practical vocabulary, heard natural speech patterns, talked about the genuine way people interact, all within this context of growing things.
That kind of real-world English immersion, hearing how words are actually used naturally, how sentences flow, how people genuinely communicate their experiences, their frustrations, their joys, is just absolutely invaluable for developing fluency, isn't it?
It really is. Because, we understand that learning a new language is a journey. Sometimes it feels like that winding garden path with unexpected challenges, maybe some pests along the way, but also those delightful discoveries.
Much like tending a garden, yeah.
And just like a tiny seed pushes through the soil, sometimes against all odds, to become this vibrant plant, every new word you understand, every phrase that finally clicks, it builds towards your fluency and your confidence.
So don't be discouraged by the weeds of confusion, perhaps, or the pests of making mistakes. That's all part of the process. Keep nurturing your language skills, keep practicing.
And remember that every conversation, even a simple one about the weather or what's growing outside, is a chance to grow your English. Embrace the process, just as gardeners embrace the unpredictability of nature and find satisfaction in seeing something flourish through their care.
Well said.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. Perhaps your own deep dive into English can truly begin just by observing the world around you more closely, noticing the everyday conversations happening right outside your window, or maybe even in your own kitchen.
What surprising vocabulary and insights might you discover if you really started to listen actively?
And perhaps even try to grow something yourself, even if it's just a small pot of basil on your window ledge. The natural world and the rich, authentic conversations that spring from interacting with it offer this endless supply of real English, just waiting for you to cultivate it.
A lovely thought to end on.
We hope so. If you've enjoyed this deep dive today and found it helpful for your English learning journey, please do take a moment to like this episode.
And maybe share it with a friend who might also benefit.
Yes. And please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future explorations into language and learning.
Your support really helps us continue to bring you these enriching conversations.
It truly does. Until next time, keep digging, keep growing, and keep learning.